Allow me to share with you today one of Canada's most chilling and protracted cold cases. For an agonizing 48 years, this particular investigation remained unresolved, leaving many to despair. Yet, the young victim's parents held an unwavering resolve, vowing to pursue justice until their final breath. Remarkably, recent advancements in modern forensic technology finally brought closure to this decades-long mystery. Our story begins with Sharron Prior, born on February 9th, 1959, in the vibrant city of Montreal, Canada. Her mother hailed from Great Britain, her family having immigrated to Canada when she was just a toddler. Growing up, Sharon's mother lived her entire life here, eventually meeting and falling in love with George, a Canadian serviceman. Their romance blossomed into marriage, and soon after, Sharron came into the world. Just before Sharon's second birthday, her mother gave birth once more, welcoming twin girls named Doreen and Maureen. In 1962, George received orders for a relocation to Manitoba, Canada, prompting the family's move to this new city. Their new residence was situated in one of the city's older districts, yet it was concurrently considered one of its safest. Following their relocation, the couple expanded their family further with the birth of a boy, whom they named George Jr. Unfortunately, the move proved to be a catalyst for the family's unraveling. By 1965, their relationship had deteriorated to the point where the couple made the difficult decision to divorce. Sharon's ex-husband continued his military career, constantly moving from base to base. Meanwhile, her mother, now with 4 children, settled into an apartment in Valangie, Canada, secured through a military assistance program. It was a truly beautiful, serene, and inviting location. It was perfectly understandable that Sharon's mother believed she had found the ideal environment to raise her children and build their future. Little did she know that even in such tranquil surroundings, genuine evil could lurk. From a very young age, Sharron was consistently described as a sweet, radiant, and deeply caring girl. She possessed a remarkable sense of responsibility, sincerity, and kindness, making it impossible for her to ignore anyone in need. This profound empathy often led her to rescue stray animals from the streets, especially those who had endured cruelty or suffered from illness. She would lovingly nurse them back to health, provide medical care, and then diligently search for new, loving homes for them. It was abundantly clear that Sharron held a deep affection for animals, and her dream for the future was to become a veterinarian. A short while later, Sharron joined a school club where she discovered a passion for hockey. Beyond sports, she was also quite artistically inclined, spending her free time attending art classes and taking needlework lessons. Sharron was a truly multifaceted individual, and it appeared her future was destined to be wonderfully bright. Her mother was immensely proud, captivated by the young woman her eldest daughter was becoming. Sharron was her indispensable helper, inherently cautious, always striving to avoid questionable company and any potential trouble. Tragically, these admirable qualities did not shield her from an unexpected encounter with a cruel individual who crossed her path. By 1975, the Prior family continued to lead their well-ordered life. Sharron, at 16 years old, was a typical teenager navigating the common challenges of that age. She embraced the popular music of the era and explored newfangled hobbies that her parents didn't always fully endorse. During this period, she also began dating a young man named John. He had harbored feelings for her since 4th grade and had finally succeeded in winning her affection. They often spent time together with friends and were widely regarded as a strong, loving couple. Seeing their genuine affection, Sharron's parents were supportive of the teenagers' relationship. According to Sharron's mother, she and her daughter rarely had conflicts. They were both willing to compromise and could always reach an understanding. Our story's heroine was surrounded by good, caring people. Unfortunately, even they could not protect her from the tragedy that lay ahead. March 29th, 1975, began like any other ordinary day for the family. The heroine of our story woke up and had breakfast. Her mother was not home at that moment. With Easter approaching, she had gone to the store to purchase food and gifts for her children. Upon her mother's return with the groceries, Sharron, as the eldest daughter, readily helped her unpack. This day was meant to be a special occasion for every member of the family. Adding to the festive anticipation, her mother's boyfriend and her friends, along with their son Stephen, were planning to visit. Sharron spent the better part of the day decorating Easter eggs and preparing for the holiday. Stephen arrived early and engaged in play with her younger brother. Later, the schoolgirl got ready to accompany Stephen to the Sports Association, an organization dedicated to both athletic activities and handicrafts. Sharron was particularly keen to pick up her Leo's jacket. This distinctive piece of clothing was named in honor of the founder's brother, who had tragically passed away from leukemia, and it symbolized membership in the Sports Association. Not every child received one. They had to earn it, typically by distributing lottery tickets. Sharron had worked diligently, selling enough tickets to qualify, and was eagerly anticipating the moment she would proudly receive her personalized jacket as a reward. Sharron was brimming with excitement, but a keen disappointment awaited her. The association didn't have her size in stock. Thus, she was compelled to return home with Stephen, empty-handed. She planned to retrieve the jacket on another day. Despite this setback, her festive spirit remained undimmed. She joined her mother and her boyfriend, Doug, to assist with the final holiday preparations. Later, the guests arrived, and the festive dinner proceeded wonderfully. Afterward, her mother and eldest daughter busied themselves hiding Easter eggs for the younger children to discover. Sharron then asked permission to go to the local Marina Pizzeria, a popular hangout spot for teenagers not far from their home. Her mother often allowed her to go there with friends, and this occasion was no exception. Having received permission, the schoolgirl retreated to her room to get ready. Around 6 p.m., one of her neighbor friends dropped by to visit the Prior family. The girls chatted while Sharron prepared for her outing. She borrowed one of her mother's sweaters and put on her favorite suede jacket. Around 7 p.m., the friends departed the house, but Sharron proceeded to the pizzeria alone, as her neighbor had changed her mind about going. The friends parted ways, one heading home, the other intending to meet up with her own circle. A sizable group of teenagers had already gathered at the pizzeria, all awaiting Sharron's arrival. When she didn't show up on time, the young people simply assumed she was late, perhaps lingering with her boyfriend, John. Consequently, they didn't raise any alarms and continued to enjoy their evening at the establishment. Meanwhile, several guys from their group were at home watching a hockey game. Once it concluded, they also made their way to the pizzeria. Among them was Sharron's boyfriend, John, who arrived to find no sign of his girlfriend. In truth, he had no idea where she was. Like the others, John had fully expected Sharron to be there by the time he arrived with his friends after the game. Her absence began to concern everyone present, as it was highly uncharacteristic for the usually punctual schoolgirl. Back home, Sharron's mother had put the younger children to bed and was watching television. She grew increasingly worried when her daughter failed to return home at the expected hour. However, the woman decided against raising an immediate alarm, opting instead to wait a little longer. Her mother presumed Sharron had simply lost track of time, perhaps enjoying herself with her boyfriend, and would eventually return. She remained in the living room, watching TV, determined not to miss her daughter's return. But Sharron still wasn't there. Around 1:30 in the morning, her mother could no longer contain her mounting fear. There was still no news of her daughter. It was far too late to call Sharron's friends, forcing the distraught woman to wait until morning, periodically peering out the window. At dawn, her mother began calling the teenagers, desperately trying to ascertain Sharron's whereabouts. Unfortunately, neither her friends nor her boyfriend John had any idea where she was. To her horror, The woman learned that her daughter had never actually made it to the pizzeria that evening. A friend who lived next door confirmed that she and Sharron had said their goodbyes on the street. She, too, had never seen her neighbor again after that. When Mrs. Prior spoke to Mary, her daughter's best friend, her concern intensified dramatically. Mary revealed that just after 7 p.m., a 23-year-old girl named Cheryl Roy had been attacked near the pizzeria by a stranger wielding a knife. Fortunately, other people were passing by at that moment. The girl's screams had drawn their attention, frightening the attacker, who then fled. According to witnesses, the assailant headed in the very direction from which Sharron was supposed to have approached the pizzeria. Witnesses described the knife-wielding man as tall, with dark hair, blue eyes, and a mustache. He spoke in a quiet, calm tone and was dressed in a ski jacket, blue jeans, and pointed shoes. This information sent Sharron's mother into a full-blown panic. She realized that the time and location of the attack perfectly coincided with the route her daughter typically took. The woman immediately went to the police, but detectives, cautious by nature, did not jump to conclusions. The officers chose not to immediately accuse anyone of the attack. Instead, they decided to launch an immediate search operation for the missing girl. Hundreds of people, upon learning of the disappearance, took to the city streets. They were given photographs and descriptions of the 16-year-old schoolgirl and painstakingly searched for the teenager. Sharron's mother even appeared on television to inform the local community about what had transpired. She implored anyone with valuable information to contact the police and assist with the search and rescue efforts. Regrettably, all these efforts proved fruitless. Several days passed without any new information surfacing about Sharron. Her mother still clung to the desperate hope that her daughter would return safe and sound. The police tried to offer encouragement, but they understood that the critical 48-hour period had long passed, meaning the chances of finding the teenager alive were rapidly dwindling to zero. The missing girl had no discernible reason to run away from home. There were no problems with her parents or at school. Sharron was in a loving and understanding relationship with a kind young man, who certainly didn't seem like the type to commit such an act. There was no one who would have any reason to hate the girl, and Sharron conscientiously avoided any troublesome company. Consequently, the police found themselves with no leads or suspects in the initial stages of their investigation. Attempts to locate the knife-wielding criminal who had been seen in the area also proved unsuccessful. The agonizing silence stretched on for an excruciatingly long time. Sharron's mother, distraught beyond words, continued to hold onto a glimmer of hope. Then, on April 1st, she awoke around 6 in the morning and noticed a strange scene outside her window. A young man she knew emerged from Sharron's friend's house, crossed the street, and picked up a newspaper that had been left on the doorstep of the missing schoolgirl. The worried woman sensed something was terribly wrong and called out to him, trying to understand what would prompt a young man to be up so early, going from house to house, seemingly stealing newspapers. However, he never responded, instead quickening his pace and quickly heading back inside. The woman rushed out onto the street and caught up with the young man halfway. He tried to cling to the newspaper, but the heartbroken mother snatched it from his hands. The guy literally screamed at her not to look, but the woman did. On the front page, her mother saw a photograph of a girl's body, which had been discovered in the snow. It happened in the suburbs, just a few minutes' drive from their home. The mother was not only shattered by this news, but also by the fact that the police had failed to notify her about what happened, despite their obligation to do so. She learned about the horrific discovery later than many of her neighbors, who had already read the latest press. The woman tried to convince herself that it wasn't Sharron, but merely another schoolgirl who bore a strong resemblance to her daughter. Gathering her composure, she called the police to refute the frightening newspaper headline. Detectives, however, stated they were not yet certain the body belonged to Sharron and invited her mother to identify it. The woman was so overwhelmed with fear and grief that she knew she couldn't bring herself to do it, so she asked her ex-husband to go in her stead. The entire neighborhood was in shock. The photo of the discovered victim truly did resemble the missing teenager. Furthermore, she was dressed precisely as Sharron's mother had described to the police. The deceased father immediately recognized his daughter. There was no room for doubt. The 16-year-old schoolgirl was dead. Her body had been discovered by a local resident who had also read the newspaper story about the girl's disappearance. When he found the body, he realized the deceased looked just like Sharron. He promptly filed a statement about the terrible discovery and the intrusion onto his property. The man admitted that he always kept all doors locked. But on Tuesday, he noticed that a lock had been forced and a door was unlocked. He found it odd that there was no sign of forced entry, almost as if the intruder possessed his own key. In fact, he was the only one with unfettered access. When he walked out onto the driveway, he saw a woman's body lying there, naked from the waist down, yet nothing had been stolen from the house. Jacques, the resident who found the body, couldn't comprehend why the body had been left on his property. A patrol unit swiftly arrived at the scene and initiated a murder investigation. The police immediately recognized the brutality of crime. Numerous signs of beatings, hematomas, and bruises were evident on the body. The girl was dressed only in a zipped jacket and a blue sweater, naked below the waist. Her jeans were found a few meters away from her body, alongside her underwear, which was eerily hanging from a tree branch. Her mouth was covered with badly chewed tape, tangled in her hair. She had clutched it tightly in her hand even after death, a clear indication that she had struggled fiercely to free herself. There were unmistakable signs that Sharron had attempted to get up, meaning she had been left to die while still alive. The tortured schoolgirl simply lacked the strength to do so and save herself. At the scene of the tragedy, police discovered other critical evidence. Approximately 15 meters from the property, tire tracks were visible on the ground, and a bloody trail of droplets led from there directly to the body. No signs of dragging were found, leading investigators to immediately presume that multiple individuals might have been involved in this horrific act. No dirt was found on the body, socks, or shoes. This indicated she hadn't crawled on the ground under her own power. She had simply been carried out of a car and abandoned to die in the freezing cold. A man's shirt was found near the body, and there were signs of ligature marks on the victim's wrists, suggesting the shirt had been used to tie her. This piece of clothing also offered a clue about the main suspect, indicating he was quite tall. Near the entrance gate post, another crucial piece of evidence was left, a clear imprint of a boot. It was also at this spot that a receipt for Leo's jacket, the one the victim never received, was found. A subsequent forensic examination confirmed that the girl had died just a few hours before her body was discovered. It became obvious that she had been held captive for several days, from Saturday until Tuesday. The criminal had tortured and raped her. Sharron's death was exceptionally brutal. There were signs of strangulation on her neck, and she had choked on her own blood. Forensic scientists found that her ribs were crushed, the trauma consistent with a killer kneeling on the victim's chest area. The girl also suffered a severe head injury, specifically internal bleeding. She had been stabbed multiple times, and her jaw was broken on both sides. Her nose was also fractured, and her cheek was torn by her own tooth, which had been knocked out by a forceful blow. On April 4th, 1975, approximately 200 friends, relatives, and concerned local residents gathered at the local Presbyterian church to say their final goodbyes to Sharron Prior. Her mother, barely able to stand from overwhelming grief, longed for nothing more than the swift capture of the killer. 9 months before Sharron's murder, another brutal killing of a teenage girl had shaken Canada. In Chateauguay, 12-year-old Norma O'Brien was murdered. On the evening of July 9th, 1974, she left her home, intending to go to the pool to play water polo. Upon arrival, she discovered the pool closed for repairs. Norma began her walk back home, but the girl never returned. That evening, she was reported missing. Her family adamantly insisted that Norma would never run away from home, so a search commenced. The very next day, her partially naked body was found in a field near the pool. The murders of Norma and Sharron bore striking similarities. Norma was also found semi-naked, raped, severely beaten, and strangled, and the locations of the attacks were only about half an hour apart. Consequently, theories emerged suggesting they were committed by the same individual, yet there were no concrete leads. Following Sharron's murder, on June 23, 1975, 14-year-old Debbie Fisher disappeared in Chautauqua while riding her red bicycle home. She never made it. The next day, Debbie's body was discovered in the woods. She was found naked, but with no signs of sexual assault. Her death resulted from a blow to the head with a rock. A 17-year-old boy was later arrested and confessed to Debbie's killing. As he was a minor, his name and photo were withheld from the public. Debbie's killer recounted that he was riding his moped home from work around 6:30 p.m. when he spotted Debbie on her bike, carrying a bottle of milk. He observed her intently, and a horrifying plan began to formulate in his mind. The guy greeted her, and she returned the greeting. The criminal then overtook her, hid his moped in the bushes, sat on the curb, and pretended to cry. Seeing this, Debbie stopped. The guy asked her to come closer, and she did. The criminal then seized her and began groping her. He threw the milk into a nearby field, struck the girl on the head with a stone, and she lost consciousness. He then concealed her bicycle in the bushes and attempted to rape her, but failed. In a fit of rage, he struck her on the head with another stone. Debbie died. He then hid her body in an abandoned car in the woods and sped away on his moped. Debbie's killer later confessed to Norma O'Brien's murder, but vehemently denied any connection to Sharron's murder. He had a confirmed alibi for the time of the 16-year-old girl's death, so he was not considered a suspect in Sharron's case. He was ultimately convicted of the murders of the two girls. Due to his underage status, he served only a few years and was subsequently released from prison. Today, he reportedly lives and works in Montreal. At the scene where Sharron's body was discovered, police had collected a substantial amount of evidence that should have led them directly to the killer. Detectives initially believed the case would be resolved within days, but these expectations proved far from reality. 13 months passed, yet the police still lacked a prime suspect to charge. It was revealed that 38 individuals who had even the slightest connection to the events of that fateful evening were interviewed. 6 of them were detained, each seemingly fitting the general description. Police were particularly interested in Frank Daly, the pizzeria manager, but ultimately, all were released due to a lack of concrete evidence against them. Sharron's close friends were also questioned, and all provided confirmed alibis. Some were at the pizzeria, while others were at home watching a hockey game. Gradually, the investigation began to lose momentum. Investigators were unable to uncover any new information. All leads and lines of inquiry proved difficult to pursue. It seemed as though everyone had given up. Everyone, that is, except the victim's mother. She never ceased her tireless efforts to uncover the truth of what had happened to her daughter. She knew that Sharron couldn't have gone far from home. Around the time Sharron headed to the pizza place, she would typically have encountered one of her neighbors who had been returning home from work at the same time every day for years and consistently took that exact route. However, the man claimed he hadn't seen the girl on the sidewalk that day. Given that Sharron had not ventured far from home, she must have been seized shortly after she said goodbye to her friend. The criminal had a window of only a few minutes, and he miraculously managed to exploit it, carrying out the kidnapping without being seen by anyone. No witnesses to Sharron's attack could be found. It appeared to be the perfect crime. The victim's mother was convinced that close attention needed to be paid to all the neighbors on their street. Surely someone must have seen a suspicious stranger, or perhaps recognized the attacker if he was a local resident. According to detectives, the killer and rapist was quite young, likely around 20 years old, and probably still living with his parents. It was theorized that he had psychological deviations, manic compulsions, or other abnormalities that fueled anger or hatred toward women. In their professional opinion, this crime was unlikely to be the killer's first. If the criminal wasn't caught soon, it certainly wouldn't be his last. Furthermore, detectives were convinced that multiple individuals participated in both the kidnapping and the brutal murder itself. It was thought that one of these individuals could well have been the random, knife-wielding assailant who had attacked another girl, Cheryl, around the same time, but had then fled when scared off by strangers. A description of this perpetrator was compiled from witnesses to the attack on Cheryl, but despite all efforts, he had not yet been found. The mere fact that two rapists and kidnappers would begin operating simultaneously in one of the city's safest areas was statistically improbable. Therefore, detectives believed that the same person was responsible for both Sharon's murder and the attack on Cheryl. However, the criminal's behavior suggested he was familiar with the area, capable of moving around without leaving traces or arousing the suspicions of other residents. Detectives ultimately concurred with the victim's mother. Most likely, the killer lived nearby. The attacker's personality was determined to be sadistic. Typically, individuals with such deviations follow a distinct behavioral pattern. They seek out docile people, initially attempting to appear charming and pleasant. As they manipulate their victims, they gradually become more cruel and demanding. It all begins with control, progresses to humiliation, and then they openly mock their victims. This is precisely the scenario in which romantic relationships with women can devolve for such individuals, and gradually the sadist moves on to committing heinous crimes. He no longer seeks a partner, but transforms into a predator, actively hunting. Against this backdrop, police believed it was crucial to thoroughly investigate all local residents with convictions for harassment and domestic violence. Investigators primarily wanted to find and interview the mysterious knife-wielding attacker who assaulted Cheryl. He fit the criminal's description, exhibited poor interpersonal skills, using a knife instead of words, and likely wasn't a successful person or one with a high IQ. This very personality type seemed to be tragically imprinted on Sharon's body. Given the extent of the beatings, he clearly preferred to achieve his desires not through words, cunning, or deception, but through sheer brute force. It was obvious he lacked self-control, easily losing his temper and ready to resort to violence immediately. The most terrifying realization was that the police were hunting a probable serial killer who urgently needed to be stopped. And for now, he was always one step ahead of the detectives. The police pressed on with their search for the killer. Unfortunately, in that era, many crucial technologies we now rely on, like DNA analysis, CCTV cameras, phone geolocation, and more, simply hadn't been invented. Their hands were tied, and investigators, perhaps not working quickly or professionally enough, allowed the killer to strike again. 6 years after Sharon's mutilated body was found, 12-year-old Tammy Leakey died. It was presumed that the sadist, having attacked 16-year-old Sharon, decided to target easier victims for torture, shifting his attention to younger girls. When Tammy's body was discovered, the case was handled by the same police officers who had been searching for Sharon's killer. It was impossible to ignore the chilling similarities between the nature of this murder and that of the first victim. This further bolstered the police's serial killer theory. On March 20th, 1981, Tammy Leakey was visiting her grandmother. Like the maniac's previous victim, she disappeared just a few blocks from the house where she lived. Her grandmother wasn't feeling well and had asked the child to go to the store, but the schoolgirl never returned. All that was found when she went to the store were her glasses on the sidewalk, which her own mother noticed upon returning home. The woman immediately reported her daughter's disappearance to the police. They found a witness who saw a man in a beige raincoat exit a small red car and forced the screaming girl inside. That same evening, Tammy was found clinging to life on the street. A man went to the police station and reported the terrible discovery. She was naked and covered with clothes. Doctors fought for the girl's life, but to no avail. She ultimately succumbed to her injuries. The girl had been strangled. She was not raped, but traces of male bodily fluid were found on Tammy's clothes. The attacker, just as careless as with the previous victim, left enough evidence, but none of it allowed investigators to get any closer to solving these brutal murders. Despite the detectives' most diligent efforts, the investigation once again reached a dead end. Meanwhile, other similar attacks on girls and young women were occurring in neighboring areas of Canada. In 1978, 17-year-old Lisa Blaze was found dead just a few meters from the home she shared with her parents in Montreal. She had left a disco bar early in the morning, received a severe blow to the head, and was raped. Her case remains unsolved to this day. There were so many such cases that police struggled to determine whether they were connected or not. In 2000, Sharron's mother reached out to the police. She requested that the materials from her daughter's case be reanalyzed, citing the significant technological advancements during that period, including the emergence of new, more effective, and accurate forensic methods like DNA analysis. A week later, the woman received a response by mail. To her profound disappointment, most of the evidence collected in the year of her daughter's murder had disappeared by 1995. Among the few items that remained were Sharron's clothes and a likely suspect's shirt. Forensic scientists analyzed the man's shirt and successfully obtained a DNA sample that did not match the murder victim herself. No matches were found in any existing databases at the time. The DNA sample was meticulously preserved for future comparison with potential suspects' genetic material. It would later play a pivotal role in the case. In June 2004, police received an anonymous tip about a garage where the killer may have held Sharron captive. Detectives arrived at the location but were unable to find any physical evidence. They collected 3 DNA samples, but none matched Sharron's DNA or the materials found on her clothing. The tip was eventually dismissed as a hoax. The next significant development in the case occurred in 2012 when an anonymous tipster offered a $10,000 reward for information, leading to the conviction of the 2 girls' killer. This event seemed to indicate that there had been some shifts in the investigation, and the police might have new information. A special hotline was set up for anyone to contact the detectives, confirming the investigation was indeed ongoing, but this new step, like dozens before it, failed to yield any significant progress. Detectives revisited the Cheryl attack case in an attempt to identify the perpetrator. Afterward, the girl who had scared off the knife-wielding attacker from Cheryl and seen his face agreed to undergo a hypnosis session. While in this state, she was shown photographs of various men, including serial killer William Patrick Fife, and she stated he looked very similar. Patrick was a Canadian serial killer officially convicted of killing 5 women in Montreal. In fact, he himself claimed that his list of victims included 9 people, though no other confirmed victims were ever found. Detectives had long considered his possible involvement in the girls' murders and tried to link him to these cases. However, the criminal denied his guilt, claiming he only began killing in 1979. As a reminder, Sharron was killed in 1975. No evidence linking him to the case of the 16-year-old schoolgirl could ever be found. Later, there were attempts to connect the murders of the girls with other dangerous killers in Canada. One of them was Mike French, a member of the Montreal Satanic Biker Club. He lived in the area in 1975 at the time of Sharron's murder and moved in with his parents just 2 years later. His male acquaintances described him as an aggressive, violent man and fully conceded that he could have killed the girls. Several witnesses even heard Mike confess about his participation in Sharron's brutal murder. But here, too, the police were unlucky. Mike was killed during a gang war in November 1982, taking any information about his possible involvement in the attacks to his grave. His own murder was also never solved. Regardless, these ideas never progressed beyond mere speculation. The Prior family was understandably shocked by what they perceived as the police's unprofessionalism, as they had been unable to find the culprit for so long. They vowed to relentlessly fight for justice until their last breath, driven by the singular goal of finding and punishing the criminal. Sharron's mother believed this was a battle not only for her own daughter's justice, but also for all other parents who had lost their children. In 2019, the mother participated in a television production alongside 9 other families, collectively accusing the police of incompetence. The detectives, notably, refused to be present during the interview. A significant breakthrough in the case finally occurred in June 2022 when a match was found in a DNA database using cutting-edge genetic genealogy techniques. A sample from a man's shirt, discovered at Sharron's murder scene, was believed to be a match to Franklin Romine, who had died in 1982 under mysterious circumstances. The suspect's body was exhumed for definitive DNA testing. On May 23, 2023, the link was officially confirmed. Franklin Romine matched the suspect's description given by witnesses, lived in the attack area, and his car matched tire tracks found near Sharron's body. He had a turbulent criminal history, including past convictions for assault and rape. This momentous confirmation finally solved Sharron's murder. There was no one left to charge or prosecute, but investigators could finally bring closure to this decades-old case. The murder of the 16-year-old schoolgirl was solved thanks to new DNA testing methods and the unwavering persistence of the Prior family. That's all for today. Let's delve into this story further in the comments below. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon on the channel.